Brock Dolman is with the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. I've introduced him a couple times, and I'd say when I took my permaculture classes and they said, what are you interested, what do you want to specialize in? Watersheds. By far, all the name I got everywhere across the board is please be mentored by Brock Dolman. So Brock, thank you for coming. Thank you for inspiring us. I think the name of your talk is supposed to be "This is the Time," because there is urgency. We want it to rain. And you hold so much of the big picture and solutions. Thank you for coming. Thanks, Brock.
Yay. Thank you, Regina. Such an honor to be here, and an honor to also, and I just want to share my gratitude to Trina for just who Trina is and for opening us up in such a good way. And so I will share my screen here, and we will get right after it. All right, that looks good, hopefully.
Yep.
Okie doke. All righty, here we go. Not going to dwell much on Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, but you can look us up online. We're an 80-acre demonstration intentional community organic farm wildland restoration location in western Sonoma County. Been here, this is our 27th year. And one of the programs is the Water Institute with Kate Lundquist, who you can see in a couple of those shots there. We co-direct the Water Institute, which is our watershed advocacy, training, education, and research institute. And a little bit about what I'm going to talk about now is we'll highlight a bunch of the work that we do at the Water Institute. And I do want to acknowledge that where I'm at here in western Sonoma County is in the traditional homelands of the Southern Pomo, Coast Miwok, Kashaya Pomo peoples. And we at OAC have been doing our best to try and be a good guest as we dwell in their traditional homelands with them, as part of what is the Federated Indians of Great and Rancheria for the Southern Pomo and Coast Miwok peoples. And then stepping out bigger, just for all of us who are so-called earthlings, but I would like to recognize that we're also waterlings. And so welcome to planet water. And really, you know, water is this only place in the known universe where carbon-based and mostly water life is endemic. And water is life and carbon is life, and then life is an emergent property and it's endemic on this planet. And if Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos want to go to Mars to find some good riddance to them, but as a biologist, I'm not going to go to a lifeless place when we've got this unbelievably watery planet here. I've been chasing life in the water for kind of as long as I can remember. This is, my dad's passed on, but he's a retired colonel in the Marines, or captain, I'm sorry, in the Marines. And back in June of '68, here I was in a rice paddy in Iwakuni, Japan, chasing tadpoles. Notice the technique though, the knees are not in the mud. Don't mess your clothes up if you gotta go for the tadpole. I currently dwell, and OAC is located in the Russian River Basin. We're actually in the Dutchville Creek watershed, which is a tributary of the lower Russian River. And with a few other tributaries, it's one of the most important watersheds in the Russian for the recovery of coho salmon, steelhead trout. And so we honor totem salmon and primarily do so much work on behalf of those relatives, if you will. And I think it is worth just noting for all of us to get right off here that, you know what, pretty much all of us live in watersheds, unless you're a sailor out on the ocean and you're just biding your time until you get back to your terrestrial relationship to your watershed. Although, unfortunately, I think in California, it appears that most folks are living also additionally in a pipe shed, where they live in the watershed, but their water supply and their wastewater are often related more to pipe sheds than the watershed sometimes. And, you know, California is basically famous for its pipe dream, or it could be a pipe nightmare, depending on how you see it with this current drought. And that's a really big conundrum for the state right now, is the relationship of the level to which the plumbing and the hydrological modification of this state is at here in 2021, based on this amazing image from the 50s here. And I would just say that, excuse me, yeah, look at the Central Valley if you really want to get a reality check on this, especially the San Joaquin Valley and the relationship of all these canals. And I'm just about halfway through reading this amazing book. I would highly recommend it if you guys want to deep dive. there's so many great books about California and water, but this is a fairly new one. And I think Mark Eriks here has done a great job. And the portions of the book that talk about the Southern San Joaquin, the Kern River area, the Westlands, the west side of Kern County, whew, cautionary tale for all of us. The fun part about water, though, at some level, is that while we all get fixated on the noun, which is really a finite relationship, the solid, the liquid, the vapor of it, the game is that the verb is what's infinite. And yet it's avaricious. And as we're witnessing this drought year, the quantity of that verb comes and goes depending on, did you get the atmospheric river this year or not? Which side of the rain shadow are you on or not? And how we relate with the gift of Gaia that comes to us from that big nuke plant 93 million miles away there that runs this hydrologic cycle is really our opportunity to figure out how do we work with those forms that follow functions. And I just love this map that came out a few years ago of the drainage networks of the lower 48 and the dendritic fractal forms following functions within a fluvial network here. And yet forms follow dysfunctions. And in a settler colonialist pattern here where we clear cut and look at those poor salmon and the eel there in the 1880s, my question really is your settler colonial pattern based on regimes of degenerative disturbance or regenerative disturbance? What is your regenerative relationship? And that's, I think, a huge question for all of us to basically ponder quite a bit. Here in Western Sonoma County, the expression of that for us is that our creeks are dirty in the winter and then they're basically dry in the summer. And that wasn't the case literally just 100 years ago, 70 years ago. So from the ridgeline to the river to the reef, what is the watershed conditions and what is that relationship of the historic and current land uses and abuses in your system? Because I think Luna Leopold got it right here, that the health of our waters is the principal measure of how we live on the land. And that relationship of land and water and land use planning, general plans. What is the water use relationship of those plans? And do you believe you live in the drain age or the retain age? Is it all draining away? Where's away? Away to the ocean? Or is it the retain age where we're going to basically interact with reclaiming a relationship with rehydration? And that for me looks like watersheds become our basins of relations. What are all our relations within the basins we share from the ridgeline to the river to the reef? And really, I appreciate this Gregory Bateson quote that the major problems in the world are the result of the difference between how nature works and the way people think. And the people part there really, again, is the Western settler colonialist folks. I think indigenous folks think pretty darn good about their relationship to the system and warrant a deeper recognition and honoring of that ecological literacy and relationship. And I would argue that most of this thinking that needs to happen for folks really starts in the headwaters. And that's the headwaters that are in need of an ecosystem restoration. What is the storyline you believe? Is the planet a community or a commodity? And really then, as we rethink that ridge to river to reef, what is that reverential and resilient rehydration, revolution, retrofit? So in the forestry space, in the rangeland space, in the agricultural space, in the urban, the rural, suburban, every human land use at every scale has a ripe opportunity for a retrofit that's appropriate to the scale of the condition of the system to rethink that system. And nobody's off the hook on this. I teach a lot of permaculture courses, and this is a fun graphic that conceptually we talk about a lot. And then one of our co-teachers, Daniel Parra-Hensel, created here, thinking about permaculture design metaphorically as watershed design, and where you start in the headwaters and what's that canopy view in the global sense. And then as you move down the tributaries, you bring in all the various tactics and techniques and such. It's just a fun image that I appreciate. A lot of folks are thinking big these days and also thinking small. And so how do you think big about the small water cycle? And I appreciate Mikhail Kravchik and this photo of Mikhail that Christina Bertia took actually of him visiting us at OAC a few years ago. And I can't tell if his hand is there is basically just saying, if you give us an inch, we'll take a mile or not. But he's a great guy. And I now am honored to sit on the scientific advisory board for this Rain for Climate group, and have a look at their websites and a lot of their information about the new water paradigm and the small water cycle and the opportunity to really rethink and rehydrate. And then I just totally love this image that came out of King County up in Washington here recently that is basically is about the small beaver-based water cycle and the relationship of beavers and the presence of water on the land and evaporation and condensation and precipitation. I guess the question really is, are you part of the solution? Or are you part of the precipitate? Can precipitate the change that's needed by basically bringing back beaver? I'm going to talk more about that in a bit. But at some point, once Gaia gives that blessing to you from the sky, your job with respect to what's the condition of the land use that receives it, that water, whether it's snow, whether it's rain, whether it's fog, in whatever form as it moves on the land as quote stormwater, do you think it's a problem that you're going to pave and pipe and pollute and plunder and profiteer off of, or are you going to slow it and spread it and sink it and store it and share it? And that's a conceptual and a metaphorical and a poetic and a spiritual opportunity. And it actually is a very physical, engineering based chemistry and biological opportunity that I think is kind of, we've been working in this world of stormwater management for quite a while, and a series of booklets on our website of some of the kinds of projects we've been doing at OAC. So one of my interdigitated ditches along Coleman Valley Road there, where we're pulling off small amounts of water from the road ditch as little mini basins. And I think the whole Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that we got California way too late, later than pretty much everybody else in the nation, back in 2014. Nonetheless, the opportunity for people to participate in these sustainability agencies at your local scale is the opportunity to really look at land use and then see how are you going to adjust land use to connect that surface water to becoming groundwater. Groundwater is not really a supply. Groundwater is a storage. It's a piggy bank, and it ain't groundwater unless it was once surface water. And I think Sigma presents a really strategic and underutilized opportunity for us to actually engage and use that opportunity to really slow it and spread it and sink it and store it and share it. This is a wonderful guidebook that our local resource conservation district put out and you can find online. And at this point, this is always the case, but never more heightened than when we get into the drought, of the idea of choosing not to use water. If you can, just stop using water. And then if you're going to use it, less is more. So when you do use it, then reuse it. Obviously, localizing California waters, lots of us are involved in the world of gray water. Down in the lower left there is part of an image I snuck behind the bureaucrats at the HCD during the process that many of us were involved with in legalizing, rewriting Chapter 16A of the California Plumbing Code for gray water. You can see Brent back in the corner there with his arms crossed, wondering what the hell are we doing here? But the color of truth is gray, people. It's not black and white, it's gray. Your job is to basically put it into a mulch basin and irrigate life with it. And then, as Wavy Gravy would say, you are what you don't defecate. And so here's wonderful Miriam Bolat and James Johnson, who are core folks in the Localizing California Waters community, who a number of years ago helped us at OAC get an actual research project permit. That's what James is holding up, a stamped permit for a pilot project to research several models of composting toilets. And I can say we took our first samples last year from 2 of the toilets, and there's 0 fecal coliforms, 0 pathogens, 0 parasites, and the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK of it. The compost was beautiful and is ready to go back to the land. So when you come to OAC, we don't want you to forget your toiletries, because our toilets are going to the trees, right? That's the game. I am that which I have not shat. That which I do shall become part of the trees. And then we get into roof water, and this is a wonderful project I was involved with initiating with a number of people in the small town of Bodega, of capturing roof water for fire security in the fire hall, and residential water security and agricultural water security, with tanks that are 240,000 gallons upwards of 1.4 million gallon roof water tanks. And then we co-created the Coho Water Resources Partnership. Have a look at that. We're working in 5 watersheds. This is our 11th year, and it's an amazing organization looking at in-stream flows for coho salmon and bringing scientific solutions for both fish flows and human water security. We've put together a series of these stream flow improvement plans. So I reference you to look at those. They're really detailed documents. A couple articles that I also put in the chat that the links will be shared with folks about just one the bottom article is a peer-reviewed article, scientific literature with Dr. Matt Deitch about base flows and decentralized water management regimes. And then also I put this link in there about the California Roundtable on Water and Food Supply in one of our booklets a number of years ago. This idea of moving from the idea of storage and really thinking about retention and thinking about verbs versus nouns and infiltration versus runoff and diversity versus uniformity and distributed versus centralized. And I'll never let a talk go by without saying that nothing in nature mimics a road, according to Danny Hagens. And we've got to get our road network figured out. If you want to screw up the hydrology of a watershed, put a bunch of roads in it. Roads can become water harvesting structures. They don't have to be dehydration structures. And then there's the world of fire and our reality in a pyro-illiterate Euro-settler colonialist, Smokey Bear fetishized fire world where we have low frequency and high intensity catastrophic fires versus a high frequency, low intensive regime that was much more like an Indian burning in California, which we need to get back to. And so we've been working a lot with fire and processes. And here's an article in Fremontia's journal, the CNPS journal I wrote some years ago called Mending the Wild. And we use fire and we're doing botanical diversity. And our mantra here is fewer trees and more forest. And so we're really, it's about the quality of the trees versus the quantity and basically taking these overstocked dog hair thickets, in our case of Douglas fir, that have, because of fire suppression and clear cutting, are a significant issue, and working with youth and job training, and basically in that case taking that biological resource, and here we're using to control erosion and increase groundwater recharge and sequester sediment. Or here's a really steep gully where we're pulling invasive broom or using Douglas fir with a crew to stop a really steep gully to reduce erosion, increase groundwater recharge, raise the base elevation of the water holding capacity of the upslopes to reconnect the hyporheic flow on behalf of in-stream base flow augmentation, and provide subsurface irrigation to the adjacent trees while we create a compost pile that sequesters carbon that used to be atmospheric CO2. It's not that complicated, people. And here's a project I just did 2 weeks ago with the Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance, Terra, where we're thinning and limbing Douglas fir that's invading this beautiful black oak woodland. There's a 300-year-old black oak on the upper right there. And then we hauled that material down and are stuffing this massive head cut gully that's been dumped into a salmon stream for decades and filling it up. And so basically our mantra is that slash is not trash, but it's beneficial biomass for fulfilling your fur reel guller stuffing food, right? You got to stuff them gullies and feed the gullies so we can turn the problem of fire and fuel load and oak woodland encroachment and evapotranspiration loss with overstocked forests into a solution by actually slowing and spreading and sinking in situ to return that groundwater table and reduce sediment delivery. Again, it's a permaculture relational opportunity to be a part of a system, right? And I just want to lift up the Tribal Eco Restoration Alliance and the work of the Robinson Rancheria and the Scotts Valley Band of Pomo in Lake County and their program director, Lindsay Daly, who have this amazing crew of Pomo folks working in the woods right now. It's really fun to be with them. And honoring Indigenous wisdom as well. And thank you again, Trina, just to lift up the work of the Maidu Summit Consortium and this wonderful valley that they are now stewarding again, once again, called Tasman Koyom. And Kate Lundquist and I were honored to support them as subcontractors to develop a beaver recruitment strategy for the valley. And so we're hoping that on behalf of the Mountain Maidu, that we can support them in restoring their cultural keystone beaver back to this amazing place soon. And really that is honoring beaver. And recognize that beaver dams can buffer extremes, and this is an amazing image from the Baugh Creek in Idaho from the Sharps fire that Dr. Joe Wheaton took from Utah State. And look at this amazing emerald necklace. And they actually flew over that with a helicopter. And there was a black bear that was holed up in this that escaped the fire. And so Smokey the beaver is really your friend at this point, and we got to bring back the beaver because beavers help recharge groundwater. They can delay the release into the dry season of water. And really the question is, do you live in a water scarce area or a storage scarce area? And beaver believe that it's actually about storage as recharge, as relationship. And they also can improve water quality, such as shown in the work of Sarah Muskoff in Lake Tahoe about phosphorus removal. And so we think that beavers keep Tahoe blue as well. and they fight incision with incisors. So we're sinking our teeth into this whole opportunity here and bringing back the beaver. Beaver are native to California. There's multiple peer-reviewed papers that I've been a co-author on with a number of folks that are engaging in historical ecology about beaver that I would reference you to. And then there's a couple amazing journal books here, the Beaver Restoration Guidebook, and then the Low-Tech Process-Based Restoration. This is the PBR that you need a suitcase of, which is process-based restoration. And engaging in this work, which is really that it's about verbs more than it is about nouns. And here's an amazing case study near the town of Lincoln, sort of near Auburn, in the foothills of the Sierras there in the central part of the state. Looking at Doty Ravine with the Placer Land Trust and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Damien Ciotti, where they basically just stopped killing beaver, knocked out a couple levees, put in a couple beaver dam analogs, and then let the beavers over a couple years, 3 years, increase the wetted area by 800%. And in fact, now they're at about 1,200% wetted area increase for about $50,000. And the grazing lease operator here is able to stock more cattle on this range because there's more water. So this works. And if you want, we just had the California Beaver Summit, our first one ever, and you can go to that link, and all the sessions are actually now on YouTube, which is super fun. If you haven't read the book Eager by Ben Goldfarb, we recommend that to you. And then also our beaver booklet, have a look there. But bring back the beaver. Tell the grizzlies in California we think the beaver flag should fly high in the state. And just another book with the reference you to, it's called Basins of Relations, and I put a link to that in the chat for folks to really ask the question, do you know where your watershed is tonight? And ultimately, I'm interested in this idea of conservation hydrology and a localizing California waters way where we regenerate and rehydrate as we receive and recharge and retain and release in a reverential retrofit for your rehydration revolution. And we do it locally here in California. And with that, that's what I have for you all this morning. Okie dokie, Fluid Druid, over and out. Back to you, Regina.
All right, Fluid Druid. I usually say put on your seatbelts, but I guess when we're virtual, it's like, I hope you are all on your chairs still. Thank you, Brock. We actually, looks like we might have a time for a question. I don't, Martha, did you had a question?
Well, it a little bit. Most people don't know that Brock is a beaver Jedi. And I found something in my library recently that was about Brock through the beaver. And I have it here. I want to give it to you. Yeah,
Really?
Brock.
Oh, God.
In honor of your fabulous presentation. But before I give it to you, or actually, I'm going to give it to Mari in a moment. I want to read you something that describes you from the book. It is in standing erect that Brock is at his best. In this attitude, the awkwardness and the dull appearance of all fours are absent, and he is a statue of alertness, with feet parallel and in line, tail at right angles to his body and resting horizontally on the ground, and hands held against the breast. He has the happy and childish eagerness of a standing chipmunk, and the alert and capable attitude of an erect and listening grizzly bear. So Brock, from my library, I'm going to flip this over to, here you go, Mari. Here it is. Got it?
Got it. Although the Brock is a tireless and effective worker, he does not work unless there is a need to do so. Passing this to Sammy Salmon.
This is my salmon voice. I had some lines to read, but I can't read through this thing. So Brock, thank you for all your work you do for us, and we wanted to give this to you.
Whoa. Wow. That's amazing. I love this online thing. Oh, okay. Well, here we go. What is it? Oh, wow. The Enos Mills book. This is a classic, Martha. Thank you. This is really one of the classic books. This is amazing. And to have a hardback original, this is kind of OG. Like, when is the date on this book? We're talking about, oh my goodness, look, it's signed from Enos Mills himself, the author, in June of 1916. Holy moly. Wow.
This is in your honor as a Beaver Jedi. Thank
Oh,
you so much for all your great work.
yay.
Yay.
Oh, well, few people know that actually the Old English word Brock, and if you read the book Wind in the Willows, Mr. Brock is in that book, and Brock is actually a badger in Old English. So the badger and the beaver are united. Thank you all. So fun.
Thanks, Brock. Thank you so much. And all of you, please go ahead and if you want to go ahead, we'll capture some questions and things for Brock, but we're going to be moving along and we will send them to him